Liverpool fans have asked, can Arne Slot be trusted to turn things around? Since the start of the season, key factors have raised question marks around Slot's style of play, man management, and his future at the club. Slot feels disrespected, and he's right to feel that way. Lewis Steele joins the show to detail how the players view Slot and the work he does behind the scenes, while David Lynch gives the fan perspective too. Slot or not? You decide. So this conversation is about Liverpool's style of play, their performances this season, and fan opinion of Slot. But everything, though, needs to be put into perspective due to the tragic passing of Diogo Jota. Lewis, how does this continue to impact the players?
I think it's quite unquantifiable, to be honest, because these are a group of young players, most in the early to mid-20s, who've probably never dealt with anything like that. And they'll be seeing his shirt, they'll be seeing where he used to sit, they'll be hearing the fans singing about him every single week. And you don't know quite just when that might hit the players. It might hit them when you least expect it, and that's how grief works. So yeah, everything we say, positive and negative, has to have that caveat. We don't know just how much this has affected them.
And how did Slot deal with the situation at the time?
I thought brilliantly, personally. I think, again, he's a young manager himself, and so he's never experienced in anything like this, and so I think he dealt with it with class in the way he spoke about it. For starters, I think he was asked difficult questions very frequently in pre-season about that situation, how they were going to deal with it. I think everything he said was kind of spot on in the tone, but also the way he dealt with the players, and as Lewis alludes to, the young men there, and he's got to look after them. And I thought he did a great job of that in terms of allowing them to decide almost when their pre-season began, when they were ready for training, when they needed a day to just be at home and have a think about things and kind of process it. So I think he dealt with it really well, and as Lewis says as well, though, it's still going to be a process, and that process is ongoing, and it's the kind of big caveat around the whole season is we don't exactly know the effect, but I don't think that you could criticise the manager in any way for the way he dealt with that. I think he was absolutely spot on.
Well, before we move on, of course, our thoughts remain with Diego and Andre's family, friends, and everyone close to them. Now, at the beginning of the season, 6 signings were made, £446 million spent. They broke the British transfer fee on Florian Wirtz and then did so again with Alexander Isak. David, has that transfer worked for anyone involved?
Isak, absolutely not, I'd say. I mean, if you'd said that you were going to get to this point of the season, he'd only scored a couple of goals and not really been on the pitch very much. I mean, that was kind of every Liverpool supporter's worst fears around him, that he would have injury problems because he had previously, albeit you couldn't necessarily predict a broken leg. The fact he has been injured is something that's not a huge shock, and as I say, the output's just not there. So, when you spend that kind of money, you need instant impact, and I think that's what everybody hoped they would get from Alexander Isak. He'd come in and immediately be, the best striker in the league, or maybe the second best behind Haaland. But he just hasn't been on the pitch anywhere near enough, and so you've got to say that's been disappointing. It hasn't worked for Liverpool at all. I don't think Newcastle have got a great deal out of it either. It's not really worked for them. So no winners at the moment, but of course Liverpool will judge that signing over the length of the contract.
Sure.
But the early signs are not great.
I mean, he obviously didn't have a pre-season because of the strop that he was throwing at Newcastle. Do you think that's the reason it is?
I think that's a big reason for it. I mean, you can't legislate for Mickey van der Ven laying one thick and, breaking your leg. But Arne Slot will say, and he has said multiple times, they've signed them for 6 years and not 6 months. And I do get that. And I do think maybe this time, if we're doing this time next season, we'll be having a completely different conversation, because I do think he's going to go from strength to strength. However, when he comes back, the goal he scored against Spurs almost doesn't count. He starts again from ground zero. And the 6 years, not 6 months thing is all good, but you've basically lost a year of that already, because say he comes back in March when they think they're expecting him to, mid-March, the season's nearly done then. He's not going to be fully fit again until August. So yeah, they've already lost a year of that, and when you're paying 125 mil, that's quite a big chunk of your contract already gone.
Well, absolutely, but the thing is that the signings were so exciting. Wirtz, Ekitike, Koke, who come off the back of a brilliant season at Bournemouth. Be honest, David, did you think the title was a shoo-in?
I had a few worries, I think, about turnover. We've seen it so many times. I mean, Chelsea are probably the best example, modern example we've got of a team, huge turnover every summer. They never seem to get settled, never can play any kind of cohesive football as a result of that. So I did have a worry about Liverpool, not just the ins, but so many outs as well. So that had that slight concern. But what I did think is, at the very least, they'd maybe be in contention for the title. Might not be, shooing to win it, but they'd be up there and they'd be kind of nailed on for Champions League. You wouldn't have to worry about that. They'd be top 3 minimum and up there with City and Arsenal. And what we have seen is nowhere near that. Liverpool are in a dogfight for 4th, and they might not win that. So it's that's been really, really disappointing, I'd say.
And with the signings that they made, the expenditure being quite so vast, was there internal pressure on Slot?
I think in hindsight, yes, there was. But at the time, I think everything was just happening so quickly. They'd signed Wirtz, and before you'd even digested that, it's like, wow, they want Isak as well, or they want Ekitike as well. Everything happened so quickly, and obviously the Jota thing, which you mentioned, you didn't really have a chance to sit down and think, maybe there is pressure on him, but there has to be pressure when you've spent that much money.
It's funny you mention about everything going so fast, because sporting directors, if you listen to them and their rhetoric, it's always about things being planned long in advance. They worry about the medium to long term. Did it feel quite scattergun at the time?
It did a little, because we're not really used to Liverpool operating that way. And what's interesting is that obviously Michael Edwards was previously the sporting director. He's back now in an even more senior role. So you would have expected kind of a continuity in terms of the approach, really, that it would be we do as few transfers as possible, because that then negates the risks that are involved in transfers going wrong. But also it allows us to keep a kind of core squad together over a number of years and incrementally change that. And when you tend to do that, it's better from a football perspective. So that's what was unexpected about it. But I think what Liverpool would probably defend themselves and say, this had to happen. We'd left it too long to do this surgery to the squad. Klopp had taken on so much power in his last couple of years that maybe long-term thinking went out the window a little bit. But there's no question that the way that they've gone about it, even if it was well planned and well executed, you still felt that it was going to have a negative impact on the pitch, or there was potential for that to happen, and we've definitely seen that play out.
Why was there such a big change?
I think it was needed, to be honest. You look at Trent left the club, and quite a lot of other players moved on. I think the average age was, ticking in the wrong direction. They have really brought that down. You look at the strikers, Darwin Núñez, he wasn't good enough. I think that's fair to say. He wasn't good enough for that level. Lewis Steele seemed to want that move to Bayern Munich. So quite a lot of senior players were moving on. And I think with Wirtz, for example, it was either you get him this summer or you don't get him at all, because he was leaving Leverkusen, whatever happened. Isak just, signalled to Liverpool he wanted that move. And I think that was, again, it was do it then or don't do it at all. And they needed to freshen up the fullback position. So I think with all of them, you can look back and say they absolutely needed to do it. Maybe it just was they did too much too soon, and only really now are we starting to see these new boys really step it up in terms of their level, and also the fitness and their understanding about the style of play as well.
Well, one player they couldn't get in was Mark Gahey. Did that feel like the positivity of the window at the time, it certainly was kind of overshadowed?
Yeah, I think in that final the final day of the transfer window, when they failed to get that over the line, you did see a little bit of negativity among supporters. There was a real strong feeling, I think, that was such a key position to get in another centre-half, because they know they've got issues there. They've got Joe Gomez, injury-prone. Konate has been in the past. They knew that they needed another centre-half, and so there was worry amongst fans about that. And I think those have been vindicated. I think it's been proven right that was an area Liverpool did need to address in the end. So to not get that over the line, they've been criticised for leaving it so late, for not allowing Crystal Palace the time to get a replacement. I think all of those criticisms are probably valid, and we've seen that this season. Liverpool have looked short in that position.
Well, they're trying to rewrite that wrong with Jeremy Jacquet coming in the summer, potentially maybe as Konate potentially goes with the end of his contract. Reports were suggesting that he only wanted to go to Chelsea, but now that his first choice was Liverpool. So how do you think Liverpool swooped in and got one over on them?
Well, yeah, I think that's a really good signing. I think there's a terrible joke to be made about signing a summer jacket in the winter ready for the summer.
Terrible, yes.
But it's what Liverpool do. They plan in advance. Everyone would have preferred Jeremy Jacquet to be arriving this week rather than in June or July. But I think that's how they got him. I think Chelsea were wanting him now. Rennes didn't want to let their star defender go in the middle of the season. Why would they? And I think that's how Liverpool swooped in. I think we, in one of our Q&As on the Daily Mail, mentioned his name about a month ago as one that they were potentially looking at. But at the time, it did feel like Chelsea were the front runners. And even up until, Sunday, Monday, they still felt like the front runners. Liverpool swooped in and got him. And that's what they've done quite a lot this season. You think, if you look back to Florian Wirtz, everyone would have, if you'd asked this question 6 months ago, everyone would have said he'll go to Bayern, he'll go to Man City. Liverpool, won that one. So clearly, the pitch that Liverpool make to players is winning players over, and that's what they've done here.
I think there's no doubt as well on that one that it's probably helped in the Gay situation as well. There's a clear vacancy at Liverpool for a centre-half in the long term, and so if you're Xhaka, you're looking at that, you're looking at Chelsea, who's seemingly stockpiling every position. You don't know you're going to get your opportunity, whereas I think if he knows that joining Liverpool now, there's going to be games for him there and there's going to be opportunity to develop in the Premier League, so that's probably helped Liverpool out, I think.
Well, one of the people he'd be coming in for primarily would be Ibrahima Konate, and inconsistency really has been a theme of the season. To name but a few, Konate, Isak and Van Dijk have all had periods of underperformance. David, for you, who's been the most subpar?
I would say Alexis McAllister, to be honest. I think he's just had, for me, he was Liverpool's most important midfielder last season, just on both sides of the ball, so intelligent, progressing the ball but also winning it back, and just that he just provided the nice balance between Szoboszlai and Gravenberch. It was such a nice unit together. And yet this season he's been incredible. I was going to say up and down. It's been mostly down, to be honest. You can pick out a few performances he's put in. Real Madrid in the Champions League at home was one of them where he was absolutely outstanding, back to his best. But that was in November, and you thought at that point, OK, he's going to get going now. This is, we're seeing the real Alexis McAllister. But that's just not happened at all. And I think we're seeing almost like a physical problems with him. He just doesn't seem, he seems slow to the tackle. He just doesn't seem to be able to cover the ground. And he's never been the quickest, but I'd wonder if the pre-season injury really has hampered him massively. But he just hasn't looked his old self. And I think for Liverpool, it's been almost like being a midfielder down, because he was so crucial for them last season. He hasn't been the same player this year.
How's that manifested itself on the pitch then? Misplaced passes, weak in midfield? How's it been?
Yeah, well, I think you could see frequently this season how easy Liverpool have been to counter-attack, and he would generally have been in the right place at the right time. I spoke about him not being the paciest, but he's kind of had the extra yard in his head. Even that seems to be missing now, because he just can't seemingly get there. And then it's misplaced passes, it's not being as controlled with the ball. And he was so influential in there last season. So they've really missed the best version of McAllister, I'd say.
Lewis, you beautifully likened them to Bazball in one of your articles for the Daily Mail. They won the opening 5 games, but then their form completely fell off a cliff after that Crystal Palace defeat. Why?
Well, I think with those 5 games, they didn't actually play very well in any of them, to be honest. First game of the season, they won late on. His first away game at Newcastle was at 90 plus 10. Arsenal was a late free kick. Burnley was 90 plus 5 penalty. So even when they were winning, they weren't playing well. So I'm not saying I had a crystal ball, but I thought that their results were going to go like that. Maybe not quite as steep as they did. But I think everything just went wrong at once. I think they had a few injuries, player form, lots of players fell off a cliff. The new signings weren't gelling. Mo Salah's form really dipped in front of goal, and they just looked vulnerable. And, Slot didn't seem at that point to have the answers to solve it. Now, he tweaked a few things after the worst defeat, which was against PSV Eindhoven, and they went on this 13-match unbeaten streak. But even in that, they were still pretty turgid.
A lot of draws in that streak.
Pretty poor to watch. Yeah. To be honest, there were some good games, but most of the time I was thinking, I was sat at Anfield a couple of times thinking, this is quite boring. And you don't normally, even as a neutral at Anfield, it's normally you get what you pay for, because it's either Liverpool or you've got a really good game on your hands. And there's a few over Christmas that weren't that at all, and fans were booing at one point. I think that was against Burnley at home, was it? Yeah. I think now they're just starting to come out, but there's no consistency. They beat Newcastle last weekend, and they play against City at the weekend. I cannot call that game at all, because you just can't call anything with this team right now. And
so Lewis says boring. It's quite a damning indictment for Liverpool, because it's just not how they are perceived as a club. What is the fan sentiment?
Yeah, I think the boredom has been part of it. That the aesthetics of the football has really not kind of helped the mood, because it's not just that Liverpool have been ineffective, because there were times and seasons where they were ineffective under Jurgen Klopp, but they were always trying to play in a particular way, whereas this has been a terrible combination of being hard to watch and pretty awful as well. So no one has really seemed to kind of enjoy it, and I think that creates that atmosphere then when you can hear boos, when it is a disappointing result and a poor performance combined. And we've seen, too many of those really from Liverpool's perspective.
Well, one of the players that have been underperforming significantly this season is Mohamed Salah. 4 goals, 5 assists. It's shocking by his standards. David, Jamie Carragher said that his legs have gone. Do you agree with that?
I think it's fair. You almost don't want to be as harsh with someone who is given so much to Liverpool and has been one of the, not just to Liverpool, but to the Premier League as a whole, one of the true greats that we've seen, really. But it comes for everyone, doesn't it? You are, at some point, you are going to slow down, and I think we are seeing that now. I think I've seen many times this season, it's not just that the outputs kind of dip, but a couple of times where the ball's been put in behind for him, and maybe he's beat the defender to it, maybe, but there's not been quite that separation, and so he's not had the space to get a shot off, and he's trying to cut back inside, so he doesn't look as quick. I mean, he's still working for the team. He's still pretty good with the ball at his feet in certain situations, but that electric pace, which just made the difference between being very good and truly great, that seems to have gone really, and he has lost a bit out of his game off the back of that.
Do you think maybe then because of that, and you know how he was dropped for some games, and he said that he'd been thrown under the bus. Do you think if he is now feeling his age a little bit, his quotes were too far, and actually it was a footballing decision?
I do think his quotes were probably too far. I think that's fair to say. I think he could have gone about that in a much better way than he did. I think he was right to feel aggrieved because he is the main man, and maybe he was sort of shunted away to the side. But what he came out and said, you shouldn't be doing that about a manager, really, to be honest. And it feels like that sort of been forgotten about a little bit. It was only 6 weeks ago, really, 2 months ago max. But yeah, I didn't really buy into the fact that his legs had gone until against Newcastle at the weekend. He was outpaced by Kieran Trippier, and I just thought,
Nice.
maybe they have gone.
Yeah.
And then I saw a video of a goal that he scored last season, can't remember, and it was just so explosive, running behind. We haven't seen that all this season. I do think that maybe his form will come back, and maybe a problem he's got is we're comparing him to last season, which was just unbelievable. One of the best seasons we've ever seen by anyone in the Premier League. But it's gone from there to there. He needs to somehow try and get back in that middle. And maybe he will, but because I think he was okay at the weekend, and he's been okay since he came back, scored a lovely goal in the Champions League against Karabag. But yeah, they need a lot more from him. And, you think the games that he won on his own last season, he's just not doing that anymore.
What do fans think of him and the way he's conducted himself?
I think there was disquiet really about the way he went around things with the interview. There's a lot of people who are obviously going to support him through thick and thin, and even if they feel that he's done something wrong, they would say that it's right, because obviously the love is clearly there at Anfield for him still, and it always will be. But I do think people recognise that the timing of that wasn't great. It felt like a selfish move. I mean, he's known to have a bit of an ego. It's not out of control by any means, but a player who's that great, it's not really that surprising that he thinks he's great and he thinks he should be in the team so often. But I think the timing, it felt almost like a bit of a selfish act, because he was lashing out because, well, I'm not in the team, I'm going to create a fuss. And so I don't think it went down great in that sense. But there is, it's been very quickly forgotten about. Everyone is backing him. He's still getting his name sung. He's still absolutely loved. And I think AFCON was helpful for that. I think the timing of that he went away not long after, and so there's been a bit of a break. Everyone's got the chance to calm down. So that seems to have helped things. So I don't think fans liked it when it happened, but it's calmed down now, and it's kind of water under the bridge a little bit.
Fans want to move on, don't they?
Yeah.
They want to see him as an Egyptian king rather than someone they don't like after the years he's given. Because of that, do you think Salah can ever return to normality at the club?
Well, it's one of these things where what he said, I don't think, if you said that about me, I wouldn't be your mate again just after a handshake.
We're mates now.
Or maybe I would, given it's you. But if one of my colleagues had said that about me, I think I'd be annoyed even after the handshake. And I think that's probably how Slot feels now. However, Liverpool without Salah, even a bad Salah, is a weaker Liverpool. And I think Slot knows that. And I think he's probably shaken hands with Salah and basically said, let's put aside our differences. Let's, do whatever we have to do between now and the end of the season, and then we'll, see where the land lies in June.
Yeah, well, we were told it was a handshake and not a hug with Arne Slot. Daily Mail football editor Ian Ladyman wrote that among the fan base, there is no unconditional love, and indeed no manager has been criticised, critiqued, and by a vocal minority, lampooned for what he says and does, quite like Slot has been recently since Roy Hodgson briefly came and went in 2010, 2011. What are the fans making of Arne Slot?
They probably wouldn't like the Roy Hodgson comparison in terms of he's obviously a league-winning manager, probably slightly more popular, I would say. Yeah, it's a strange one because you feel for Arne Slot, and this is the thing we said, didn't we, when he replaced Klopp? You know, it's such a tough act to follow because we're not just talking about one of the great football managers, but we're talking about an incredibly charismatic figure. To follow that, Arne Slot, he can't match that. There's no chance. Nobody could. So, you know, when you're not loved in the same way as Klopp was because you can't act like that, you're not that same personality, you've got a bit of a problem then when the results start to turn a little bit, is that love isn't there for you to kind of, for people to back you unconditionally. So I think that's been a problem for him. And, you know, he gets his name sung regularly. I think there is warmth from the crowd, but it's not Klopp levels, and therefore in the tougher periods, it's been a bit tougher for him to kind of ride that out. The crowd is a bit more prone to booing and not being happy with what they're seeing because that's not there. But you know, you feel for him a little in that because there's not anything he can do about it. But yeah, it's not the same level of affection as they had for Klopp, I'd say. And you know, he's probably, to build that up, because he doesn't have that charisma, he's probably going to have to just win more trophies. Really, I think that's the only way you can get to that kind of status of being beloved.
And Lewis, because of the pressure that he's felt this season, last year was it was a dream for him in terms of the way that everything worked out. Do you see his tone changing at all in interviews, in pre-match press conferences? How does he seem to you?
He seemed quite agitated last Wednesday after they beat Qarabağ 6-0 because they just won 6-0. It was the biggest win of his era, I think. Liverpool's biggest win by far of the season in terms of the scoreline. I know you say what you want about Qarabağ, but they did have 10 points up until that point, so it was a massive win for Liverpool. However, it felt like the press conference after was negative. He was almost annoyed at fans. I think he was annoyed at maybe the journalists who he thought that we probably should say, twisted his words a little bit, or maybe taking them out of context. But I think that happens every week in press conferences because
you would say that.
If you wanted the context, you'd have to put the full transcript, and we don't do that. It's always, you know, manager X said this.
You take the best bit. Snippets. Yeah.
So maybe he did have a point slightly, but he did seem agitated. And then on Saturday, he seemed more calm, or you know, he's cracking his one-liners. He comes out with a few little gags every now and then, and he was on good form again. But I think overall, when he came in, if you'd said after 18 months he will have won a league title and he's got them, you know, competing for the top four, but it's not certain, and he's, you know, done okay in the Champions League, I think every Liverpool fan would have taken that. But his problem is he's almost done it in reverse. I think last season, if they finished 4th or 5th, gone deep in the Champions League, had a run in the FA Cup, every fan would have said, you know, that's brilliant for a first season. He's gone and won the league, and then he's had the bad season. I think that's his biggest problem, really, especially with the money they spent in the summer. You know, the pressure's on because of that from the outside world as well as Liverpool, whereas at the start of last season, no one was really saying Liverpool are the favourites to win the league. City and Arsenal were the main two. So yeah, I think he's probably not helped himself by winning the league, as stupid as that sounds.
Yeah. And in terms of what he's saying and his tone as well, you get the sense recently that he's kind of grasping to defend himself a little bit. And I think, fair enough, by the way, because he shouldn't have to defend himself. I mean, he came in and won a title that nobody expected, and you know, the season hasn't gone perfectly, but as Lewis says, if it had been the other way round, I think people would have been fine with it. But I think what he's probably got to get better at is to kind of push some of that away and not get influenced by what's said about him online. Try and avoid it if possible. Ask people not to send it to you, because I think the big difference with Jurgen is that he would call us out as journalists quite frequently, actually. But I think what Slot was doing at times was kind of saying, well, this is being said about me by supporters and I'm not happy with that. And, you know, setting yourself on a collision course with fans is a really bad idea. You know, nobody minds if they criticise us. We get it all the time, and in fact, they quite enjoy it if we get criticised by the managers. But yeah, if you know, going after supporters or things they've said online, you're just creating a rod for your own back, because obviously we know what it's like online, social media. It can get a little bit toxic, so he probably needs to stay away from that stuff, I think.
What's his relationship like with the players?
Well, a few of them have come out in the press and sort of defended him. I think in the immediate aftermath of the Salah thing, Alisson was doing a presser and said his relationship's good. Van Dijk has said a couple of times he thinks the dressing room has let Slot down, which I think is quite, when you think about it, that's quite a strong sentiment that if the players think that they're letting the manager down. I think maybe other players less so. I mean, obviously we know what Salah thinks of him because he's told us all at Leeds. I wouldn't be surprised if, maybe not as strongly as Salah, but I wouldn't be surprised if a couple of different players may not be his biggest fan, maybe more over game time and the way he uses his rotation policy and whatever. But publicly, at least, the players say that they're behind him. And there's certain players like, for example, Ryan Gravenberch, who's completely a different player to when before Slot came in. And even Dominic Szoboszlai this season's gone up multiple levels from a good player to now a great player. Yeah. And there's various players who have done the same. So I'd say it's mixed reviews probably from the dressing room.
David, do you think he maintains the dressing room?
Yeah, I think if you've got Van Dijk, he is such an influential figure, and that is massively helpful. And I think he's never said anything but positive things about him. So I think that's been really helpful. I think a lot of the stories you hear about kind of more the negative stuff is from players who have left as well. Like, oh, you know, he was ignoring me, he wasn't taking me on. But it's kind of hard to unpick, isn't it, whether that is kind of, you know, naturally players that didn't necessarily want to leave but have left are going to be a bit disgruntled and that they wouldn't be as involved in the team and therefore wouldn't get as much attention from the manager. I don't think he's got that kind of hold over the dressing room as a Klopp did. But, you know, like another comparison that probably comes out of unfavourably is that Klopp was very good at making everybody feel involved in that squad, and he's not quite got that magic touch in terms of that, but neither is it that there's kind of mutiny in the dressing room. I do think, generally speaking, that he is well liked in the dressing room and amongst the players.
Okay, gents, we asked you before you came in today whether or not you were Slot or not. Lewis, are you Slot or not?
See what the card says. We've got.
Slot in, says Steele.
I would move the slot up slightly and then just right under it. Let's see what happens between now and the end of the season. Right now, as we stand here today, they're in touching distance of finishing in the top 4 or 5. We don't know how many will get into the Champions League. Let's presume it's 4. I still think they will, because I think they're better than Chelsea and United. I think they've got a real good chance of going far into the Champions League. That's based on their European performances this season, where they've beaten both Madrid teams. They've breezed through tough away games like Inter Milan and Marseille. They've beaten Karabakh 6-0. Their best performances, although there have been some bad ones as well, have been in Europe. And I think they could, if they have a good draw, get to the semi, and then who knows from there. And I think they could win the FA Cup, because Arsenal, Man City, their eyes will be on the Premier League. Sort of opens it up for Liverpool maybe. Again, Brighton at home is the fourth round draw, which is winnable, not easy, but you fancy them. So I think, based on that, Slot deserves until the end of the season. Now, if they don't get into the Champions League and they don't win a trophy, then that answer would probably be different. But right now, I'm Slot in, and I think the fans got quite toxic at times on Twitter with them all arguing. I think the best thing that they can do now is just sort of get behind the manager, because from all we hear from people inside the club, Slot retains the backing. He's not going anywhere till the summer at the very least. So just get behind him until then, and then we'll have this conversation again. That's my opinion.
Slot or not, David?
Yeah, I mean, the card says not. So I maybe kind of, my thinking on this is I'm similar to Lewis in that you find yourself kind of in the middle, and Liverpool's stance is very much they're going to give him to the end of the season. Let's see what happens, and I think that's the right move. I don't think they should be moving to dismiss him now by any means. Absolutely not. What I would say is they are 6th at the moment. United and Chelsea seem to be coming a little bit, and so you do worry about them getting that Champions League spot. That is going to be absolutely crucial, I think, in terms of his job prospects, is to get there. But more so than that, actually, I think he just needs a string of performances. I think Liverpool have to play well between now and the end of the season, because you can draw a line back to maybe the back half of last season where the performances started to fall away a little bit, even if the results were there. And I think FSG and the sporting director will be looking at that closely, what those underlying numbers look like, the fact there is that, you can make a case it's been a long period of underperformance, certainly in the underlying numbers. And of course, there's that spectre of Xabi Alonso there. So you can just imagine a world whereby Liverpool don't play well for the remainder of the season. Alonso's there. You've got 1 year of contract left for Slot. Very easy to make that jump and justify it. So, I think if the season ends now and he finishes 6th, then it's a problem for him. But there is so much football to play, and that is what's crucial here. So, it's in the balance, I would say, for him. And I would love to see him turn it around, but we just don't know how it's going to play out.
So basically, you both are on the position of let's see what happens. It's too early to say at the moment. The season is there to still be made something of. Could get trophies, could get Champions League, but if not, then maybe say goodbye.
Yeah, that's where I stand.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Well, thank you for watching The Pitch. Liverpool fans, you've heard from Lewis and David about what they think for Arne Slot and the season so far. Let us know in the comments what you reckon. If you like boxing, don't forget to check out The Hook on Mail Sport Boxing with Charlotte Daly. We'll be back next time for another episode of The Pitch.